welcome to another edition of the Metal Voice. And here we're going back to our 30th anniversary series, looking at classic albums that were released in the year of 1984. And today we've got the second album from that great band Dio.
Ronnie James.
The Last in Line.
Not the first in line, the last in line.
Jim, you know, this one, for myself, the first album, Dio, was a very strong album. It's one of the strongest albums that were released in the 80s. But for me, myself, this album overall, it leans a little bit more to the heavier side. It's a stronger album. If I had to select one album out of the collection, it might be this one. Actually, surprisingly enough, slightly ahead of the first album.
For me, it's the other way around.
Okay.
Slightly below the first album.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
And that was the end of our...
There's our debate.
Back. The first album, we didn't know what to expect. Dio had left Black Sabbath after the recording of the Mob Rules and the fiasco of mixing the Live Evil album. We knew he came from Rainbow before that. Elf, we didn't know too much about. So now the first album came out. Oh, okay, this is Dio and his new band. All right, we know what to expect, and it's his voice, yes, and sounds a little bit like Black Sabbath, but it's got of course it does, Vinny on drums, right? And then it's got the keyboard, so that lends to the kind of Rainbow feel. But we knew what to expect on this second album, and he does not disappoint. Usually the second album's a little bit of a downer, and it's something that is not nearly as strong. But I'll sit here today and argue that this album is just as strong, or maybe even stronger than the first album. So it was a pleasant surprise back in the day. They got the hard, the very fast, and Vinny's drumming is amazing on this album.
It is incredible.
It's non-stop. It's going from the snare drum roll throughout the chorus of We Rock to the slow methodical beats of One Night in the City and Egypt, The Chains Are On. And you've got, of course, Dio in finest voice form, Vivian Campbell. Well, we were just really recognize his guitar work.
Yes.
A little bit more keyboards on this, so, you know.
That's the first album with Claude Chanel.
Claude Chanel.
Yeah,
and then we'll know for the first time if we're evil or divine.
We're the last in line.
We're the last in line.
We're the last in line.
Which is, like you, I believe, you know, Jim, that's, as you were saying just before we started taping, it's probably one of the strongest songs Dio ever wrote.
The last in line is probably what defines Dio as Dio. When you think of Dio, you think of the last in line. Of course, you think Rainbow in the Dark, but after Rainbow in the Dark, you think of last in line. Why? He's got that soft, gentle voice, right? And then he just belts out that big note. And then the whole album just turns into this sort of powerful masterpiece.
Yeah, and even, it's like Egypt, The Chains Are On. You got that long fade out, kind of going back to like Stargazer off of Rainbow Rising. So you've got, you know, it's all ties in, and it's just, you know, Dio just being Dio.
You know why Dio is such a great singer? I'll tell you why he's such a great singer. Because he started before rock and roll was invented. I mean, back in the 50s, he was part of a bebop barbershop quartet, or sort of like a rockabilly.
Little Ronnie and the Prophets.
Right? I mean, he started when he was like 14, 15 years old, and, you know, he dates back to the beginning of rock and roll. So he's so versatile in all types of different forms of music that when he does play heavy metal, he integrates a lot of that in his voice. And he's such a professional. I mean, he's like one of the most amazing, one of the best heavy metal singers that ever was and ever will be.
Did you see this tour? Did you see him?
I did not see Last in Line tour, no.
Neither did I.
No. Oh, well, we can't comment on the tour.
We saw the other ones, but not this one.
Anyways, so Last in Line. I remember at the time, you know what I love about Vivian Campbell? Vivian Campbell, what makes this album so great, and of course all the other Dio albums with this lineup, was Vivian Campbell's guitar sound. It was sort of like an Ace Frehley sort of sound. You know, he's just riffing away and just amazing solos, but he had his own unique tone to his guitar sound. Same with Vivian Appice. Vinny Appice. He had, I mean, he's just killing it as a drummer on this album, right? But he had his own sound. I mean, it's a sort of high treble sort of snare, like you said.
It defined the sound. For me, more than Vivian's guitar work was Vinny's drumming on this. He was told by Tony Iommi when he was with Black Sabbath, or all the way through the recent Heaven and Hell tours, relax. You know, Vinny would test his limits on stage, and he'd hear about it after from Tony some nights. But Dio gave him full reign. Have fun. Wherever you got a spot to do those fills, go right ahead. And Vinny does not disappoint. He's a monster drummer, and it's proven on this album. More than I think any of the other ones. So.
And let's get realistic here, because if you go back in time, we've made Dio into this huge myth, but back in the day, I remember reading Hit Parader, right? And Dio saying statements. He was very arrogant as a singer. I mean, he was. I mean, everybody told him, "You're the man with the golden voice," and it got to his head at one point, right?
Well,
and
if you can back it up, I don't have a problem with that. He backs it up constantly.
That's it. But I mean, he did have a big ego. I mean, he had a massive ego, and that ego sort of deflated as the years went by, right?
Hearsay. It's all hearsay. I never met the man. I refuse to judge.
Everybody always had the best of words to say about Dio. Back in the day, I remember he wanted to do a movie with David Lee Roth as a sort of a cartoon of hobbits, but never came into fruition, right? He also said that he only slept like 3 to 4 hours a night because he had so many things he wanted to do, and his home was full of sort of Egyptian and mythical statues, and I mean, he had a big ego. I mean, everybody thought he was the greatest thing since sliced bread.
But he also had to take a step back with the band. You're going from Black Sabbath, and the resuscitation of Sabbath because of Dio. Two of their strongest albums. We've talked about that on lots of shows. But he had to start over. It was to a certain extent. Yes, he was a known quantity. But to have a band behind you and proven track records without having Iommi's riff or Blackmore's virtuosity, but he was also running the show and he had a clear vision of what he wanted to do. Yeah. And maybe he got criticized because of his dictatorship, but the band is called Dio.
Yes.
It's not called Appice. It's not called Campbell. Right. It's called Dio. It takes somebody to take charge, and he's learned his life lessons from his previous bands where everybody sits around and goes, okay, let's make it a democracy. It doesn't work. It takes a guy to take charge, and that's what Dio did, and that's where all these rumors come from. But
again, like what Dio said, he goes, this is a band, we write together, we perform together, we arrange the music together. However, when there's that final decision to be made, I'm going to make it.
And he produced a lot of
That's
albums.
what he did.
And I think that actually led to a bit of the downfall with Dio, is they all became kind of similar sounding.
Yeah.
That was a big critique at the time. One Dio album was like any other Dio albums. I think Strange Highways was one that took a really hard turn, but at that point, the career was pretty much at its lowest ebb. So there's our look at The Last in Line. Go back, grab it again if you haven't. Give it another listen. You'll be pleasantly surprised. It's a great album. For myself, Jim, I'm giving that a 9.2 out of 10.
I'd go at 9 out of 10.
There you go. So it's highly recommendable. Go back, revisit any of Dio's stuff, any of his work, but you'll be particularly pleased with this one. The Last in Line, his second album with his own band, Dio, released 1984. Here's our look back 30 years.